my name's Hector Fontanez, and I do many things. In the context of us meeting today, I was the voice of Matt on Downtown. Done many things throughout my life. Currently, my profession is woodworker. I'm a shop manager of a production facility that focuses on fabrication for exhibitions and artists in Greenpoint, Brooklyn, called Southside Design and Building.
How did you land the iconic role of Matt on Downtown?
I met a few people on the production side on the street. In the 90s, I rollerbladed. I was part of the whole big boom of rollerblading in the 90s. Skating ramps and doing rails and grinds and all that stuff. A big place where everyone hung out in New York City was the Brooklyn Banks. It's down underneath the Brooklyn Bridge. It's a big skate spot. So one day I was down there with a bunch of my friends, met guys who worked for Downtown that were filming people on the street. They asked us, we were suspicious of them, and then they said they were on the team that worked with Beavis and Butthead. So I was like, okay, that's some cred. Okay, we'll chat with you. But we're definitely messing around with them. They asked us to tell a story about growing up in New York. I think I might have told some composite of a bunch of stories, and it was just having fun with it. They took down our numbers and randomly got a phone call one day asking if I'd come in to audition for the part, one of the parts. I didn't know what the part was. It was just you want to come in and try it out. And then when I went in, they actually told me that they had one character that was loosely based on the interview, the story that I told. So I think it was sort of my demeanor. So when they asked me to read for my part, there wasn't a character that I needed to get into. They said, it was very much like you, the way you were, sort of laid back. Always get that one, laid back. So I got the part.
Can you share a funny or heartwarming anecdote from your experience voicing Matt?
Nothing specific comes to mind. You know what? Actually, okay, in the audition, Marco Fruity, who is my best friend on the show, he is my friend in real life. We met on the show, and we met during the audition. He was there with his group of friends, or a friend of his who were part of it. I was there with a friend of mine who was interviewed originally, and they were trying out different combinations of people to see chemistry. I think at one point they brought in one of the girls to read, and they could tell these kids, especially myself, I had no background in voiceover or anything like that, so I was just trying to keep it cool, the fake it till you make it kind of thing. And Marco, he just has that open energy, and you immediately feel like he's bringing you into friendship. He kind of gave me almost a little pep talk of all right, we got to do this. This is what they're looking for. It was he has that gift of gab kind of thing about him. So he totally gave me this, stranger. You're looking at everybody and you're thinking, those guys, maybe they're competition, who's who? And he was like, we got this, Oh, I know what you're about. Where are you from? Oh, you're from Lower East Side. I'm from Chelsea, and it's all of a sudden we're not just in this audition, we're two kids from the streets of New York, trying to get our foot in the door, and it's just instant camaraderie. But yeah, he has that way about him.
At Michael Atencio asks, are you surprised by the amount of support and interest that Downtown and your role has received in the last few years?
Yeah, I am surprised, only because the show only had one season. I know whenever I recall the show or I mention it to someone, I forget often about it over the years, because you don't see it on reruns and things like that. Most people don't really bring it up, but occasionally when you do bring it up for whatever reason, you talk to someone, people always, oh, that was cool, So I could see, especially people love, mining through the archives to find old media that's forgotten. Record collectors finding old records. So it's not surprising in that way. I think it's just surprising that it's something that I was a part of. That it's back in a way, and people talk about it. When I see your videos pop up, a friend of mine who's out in Portland, he sent me a video one morning. He's like, hey, check out this iceberg. I was like, ooh, I like an iceberg.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
Did you collaborate with the writers or animators to shape Matt in a way that reflects you more closely? If so, how?
They mentioned to me that the Matt character was loosely informed by my original interview on the street. And I believe visually it was based on Marco's friend, whose name I cannot remember. Maybe it was Noah. He was a guitar player in Marco's band at the time. He had his band called Downtown Rhythm Section. That dude straight up was Matt. He looked like Matt. He was a ginger dude, always wore a beanie, kind of lanky. And even though they said, it's kind of your character is what we're looking for with it, there was suggestion, like to kind of like mold it. I didn't have any acting experiences, and I thought, okay, well, it's just me, so that's easy. But then when you're in the studio and you're working on it, and you realize, oh, you have to kind of have, like emotional peaks and valleys in the lines. Like, oh, I'm not upset right now, but I have to pretend to be upset as myself, like, my demeanor. I was like, okay, this is acting. So you learn the acting on the spot. But other than what they were looking for, I didn't really have a sense of artistically like where he's coming from or what he's about. I probably would have that more so now because I've spent so many years making art and collaborating with people. Then I was very new to the world of art and collaborating, so I was really just trying to meet the goal. Like I knew there was something they were looking for, and I tried to get there, but I didn't have a sense of what I could offer other than that they were telling me what you bring to the table is what we're looking for. So you just try to be your most authentic self. I mean, which they wouldn't have said that then because people didn't speak that way then. That authentic self is like a term people use now, but that's essentially what they were going for. That's why they were looking for people. They were interviewing people and getting people off the street, whatever methods they used to get the pool of talent that they acquired.
Hey Hector, my name is Candace. My question to you is, how do you think Matt's character would have developed later on in the series? Bye!
I think he would have become an artist. I say that because I had a lot of friends who were into graffiti, which was a joke like that I used sometimes in real life. I would say if someone was like, "Oh, you write?" I was like, "No, but I played a writer on TV," because it was a big thing. That graffiti culture, people always like like they kind of size you up, like you write. And a lot of my friends that were graffiti artists became fine artists. So I think Matt definitely would have done that, and he was adventurous. So I think that's the direction he would have went in. You got the sense that he had his own world, separate from what was going on with his friendship with Fruity and the people in the neighborhood.
At Gadasia8 asks, what was the reaction like in the USA back when Downtown was on air? I used to watch the show on MTV Italy, and I remember that it was not so popular.
Yeah, it wasn't that popular. That probably had something to do with advertising. The animation style was pretty unique. I can't think of anything that was on television that was that looked like it at the time. MTV was producing a lot of great animation at the time. The few years leading up to it, there were definitely probably animation heads who were into it. But you think about really popular cartoons, the colors are a little more vibrant, right? You think about like The Simpsons, everything's so bright. There was something about Downtown that was a little more muted, So I don't know if aesthetically it really had the building blocks to be as popular. Marco is my plug into the world of Downtown, and he informed me that it was nominated for a Primetime Emmy, right, for animation series, which I was surprised. I didn't know that it had even that amount of interest. I believe there was an episode that didn't air. So, the fact that happened, but everyone that I knew saw it, thought it was cool. Everybody thought it was pretty cool, but yeah, it was not popular.
Yeah, the thing you mentioned about the Primetime Emmy, I've actually made it like kind of like a goal of mine to sort of research that footage of it being nominated, and yeah. I can't for the life of me find it anywhere.
Where would you find that?
I guess like VHS, home VHS like archives, like that people have like uploaded on the
internet. Yeah.
And I can't find it. I can find like 2001, the year before it, but not.
Do you think like Museum of like television and something like that would have it?
Maybe, but right? I don't know. Like yeah. That's something I have to figure out.
That would be cool. You got to get a little campaign of lost media found. There are people who will be like, lost media found this year.
They love stuff like that.
Yeah, put them on the hunt.
Hi Hector, my name is Tyler, and I was wondering what you think Matt might be up to in the year 2024. Thanks.
Hi, so I think in 2024, Matt is living on a dairy farm in Southern Oregon. I think in 2005, he ran out to the Bay Area to chase a girl, and that didn't work out, but he got into the art scene out there and stayed and started playing music and got really into like food stuff. He started making friends with farmers, and I think he lives on a dairy farm in Southern Oregon.
Were there any places in New York City that you enjoyed going to during the 90s and early 2000s?
Places like you mean like clubs or something like that?
Any place, like a park, a restaurant, a club, cafe, any place.
Yeah, there was lots of them. You know, there was a lot of street life. You know, especially when you're young. So I'm born in '79. I was a teenager throughout the '90s. I spent a lot of time in the streets with my friends. You know, it was big. Yeah, you lived outdoors for the most part. The Brooklyn Banks was a great place to meet other skaters, and you met people just from throughout the entire neighborhood, you know, the whole city. I mean, Union Square was such a big meetup spot. You know, you'd go at like the end of the night. You know, you'd skate all day, get there like around the evening time, and there was always people. You know, it was like Cheers or something. You know, like you go to a place where everybody knows your name, kind of thing. I'm sure that kind of stuff exists still. You know, like I see teenagers together out in a park, and I'm like, oh, I remember that. You know, they're looking for the adventure in life, because that's what you're doing. You know, like when you're that age and you're meeting up with other kids your age, you're looking for like, where's the good time? You know, how can we make this exciting? There were clubs. There were so many music venues in the Lower East Side back then. We used to go to Coney Island High on St. Mark's. They used to have this party called Concrete Jungle. It was a drum and bass party. There was a lot of parties like that. I mean, there must be things like that going on all the time. It's a little different just because of financially the way the city is now. It seemed like there was a lot of, you know, we were kids, we were also broke, you know, but you managed to have a good time. But yeah, there was a lot of clubs. Coney Island High, you know, CBGB's was still around, but it was, you know, way past its, but you just went in and you felt that there was history there. I'd performed there a few times, and the stage was like a trampoline. Like it just had a little give to it. But in the early 2000s, there was a club in the Lower East Side called Tonic. It was on Norfolk between Delancey and Rivington, and it was amazing. You know, I was really into experimental music at the time, and that venue like just catered to that. So you'd see, I mean, we saw so many great bands there early on, and there's a big blue building there now. You know, there's places that go away in New York, and then you look at and you're like, why couldn't they stay open? What was it? You never really get the story. It's like when a series ends and you don't get like the final one where it's all wrapped up. And then you see the business that's in there afterwards, and you're like, really? That business with the 3 paintings is able to pay the rent? And like that venue that was packed with people every night is gone. I mean, there were so many places. But as a New Yorker, if you really love your city and you learn about it, what you realize is that New York is always changing. It's never the same. So if you get wrapped up into this idea that it's my city, the city, oh, I miss my city, you're missing the heart of what the city is, you know, because it is always changing. It is never the same. The people that were there in the 70s doing stuff complained in the 80s when it changed over, and it's gone on and on and on. So, you know, the people that are having fun right now that lived through the pandemic and made the best of it, in 10 years they're going to be like, oh, I miss when the city was great during the
Most likely.
Yeah.
Have you ever been to, I think it was called Mars 2112? It was located at the bottom of the studio.
Oh, yeah, with the aliens.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. You know, that's not that far from here, right? Like, I mean, no, you know, it's not far from here. Where we actually recorded the show is only a few blocks away.
Yeah, Marco told me.
Yeah. No, I never went, but I always thought about it. I was like, oh, that place is interesting, you know? Yeah, that was fun.
But when you were mentioning all these places, I'm over here like nodding my head, like yeah, like I would know. I wasn't even born during that time.
But you know about a lot of it probably.
Through interviewing you all, you know.
Okay,
Leora, Aurora. She mentioned how her and Leora went to Mars 2112.
Yeah.
And I looked it up online. There's like very few photos of it, but it looks so cool. Like the interior and like how it's all the space themed. Mm-hmm. Man,
it was
super cool.
So I grew up in the Lower East Side.
I did too.
Right? I grew up in the Lower East Side. I lived there from like 79 to like 91, and then we moved to the Bronx for a little bit, but then Sheepshead Bay, Brooklyn was where I was at in high school. And I always went to school in the city. But I remember when I went to record or like interview for the first time for the show above the Mars place. What was that? It was the Viacom building, I think is what it was at the time.
I believe so, yeah.
Right? Okay, so I remember getting to Times Square and having that feeling like, oh, I just got to the big city. Because Times Square always kind of has that feeling. And so when you're out in Sheepshead Bay, Brooklyn, you know, which is, if you grow up in the city and then you go out to the outer boroughs, it almost feels like the suburbs, you know? I remember having that feeling of like, oh, I've arrived in New York, sort of like with Times Square, because you don't really go to Times Square that much when you live in New York unless you have to for work or whatever. So when I met them, I was 17. I was in high school. I went out to Oklahoma to work with some family doing floor covering for a summer. And my cousin was out there. He was my age. Yeah, all his friends out there were into really cool music, friends in bands. So I had a really great summer. And when I was out there, I got a phone call from my mom. Said there's these people from some show. They said you had interviewed at one point, and you forget about it. You're like, oh, I went, I tried it out. Okay. And then they say, hey, you know what? We really liked you. I think we're gonna do the show. Would you like to be a part of it? I'm like, okay, yeah. You know, back then people had to track you down. So it's like they contact my mom contacts somebody else. I get somebody's phone number and they're like, hey, we want to do this. Do you want to come in? So there was like lots of steps. I was a junior in high school when I first met them, and then I was out of high school working when we started recording the show. So it was almost like 2 years later. It was such a long process. And my high school that I graduated from, City As School, I remember showing up during orientation and seeing Aurora.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we went to the same high school.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, that looks like the girl from the audition. Right? And then she was like, hey, kid, like she calls me. And she's like, hey, so you're on the show. Did you get the show? What do you think's going to happen? And I was like, and you think when you come into a scenario like that, you think all these people already know each other, like, because she knew Leora, so they had their connection, and Marco's just so comfortable with everyone. You assumed, oh, he already knows everybody. So you kind of feel like the one on the outside. But it was so cool to actually go to school with that person. And you felt like there's this thing happening on TV, but then there's this parallel life that's your real life where you meet these people. Because then I'd always see Marco at events, like where he was really into, well, not really into, but in the late 90s, New York had a really good breakdance scene, and underground hip hop was really rich. So I participated in that. Not that I made hip hop music or was into breakdancing, but I had friends that did that, and these were great events to attend. I'd bump into Marco at them, and just hanging out at Purchase College, bumped into Marco. I had all these friends that were up there, and you feel like there's this like bleed in between the real world and the show, a little bit, in a strange way. Although I never had any adventures in the subway tunnels. Oh. Actually, that's a lie. That's a lie. As a child, where I grew up on South Street, there was this metal door that the older kids would open up, and it went down into the tunnels. Oh, wow. So that's over by the East Broadway station on the F line. It's the last stop in Manhattan before you go into Brooklyn. So, the older kids would go all the way down. And you hear stories about when you go all the way down, there's like a big room, and then you go through this hallway and you can see the train tracks, and sometimes there's people down there. So I think I got down like 1 or 2 levels with my friends. I'd get a few friends together, and then the older kids would scare us off. So that was as close as I got to going into something like that. So I guess there goes another example of this like weird parallel between the two. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Which artists do you think Matt would be a fan of in real life?
Oh, that's hard to say, because he was such a mysterious character in a way. Like I don't know what would inform that. You could go with like obvious ones, like maybe he'd be into Cause, right? It's the dude who makes all the, oh, yeah. I think but that's sort of like typecasting in a way, because you don't know what would have happened to him, who he would have met, and what he would have been. He probably would have gotten into fine art. And I think there's this world of like street art into fine art that is popular. You could say like, oh yeah, maybe he'd be this person, like into this or that. But I think he'd be into the artist, John Briner, very good artist. Yeah, I think that's who he'd be a fan of.
Should there be a continuation of Downtown?
No. I don't think so. I think some things are best left the way they exist. Like all the reboots, they're never really as good, you know? Since I mentioned Cheers earlier, I'll mention it again. Like if they had something where it's like, you know, Sam's still in the bar by him. He's an old man now, and Shelley Long comes back. You know, she went on her big adventure. It's like, no one wants to see that. There's probably people out there that want to see it and people that want to fund it, but it would just be awful. But it's really great to imagine. You know, I think that's what a lot of good art does. That it doesn't spell everything out for you, so the viewer has that experience. The art that they're viewing inspires creativity in their mind. So you kind of ponder these characters that you enjoy. Like, where did their life go? What did they do? I think it's better that way, you know, because it makes it more special too. The people that have connected with it, they can have their own personal world that exists outside of downtown that we see. You know, when it aired, I didn't actually watch all of them at the time because I was so out and about. It was hard to be there at a certain time in front of the TV back then, you know? So, yeah.
What about like a reunion, kind of like how, didn't Cheers do that?
I think they did something like that. You know, it was a good reunion. The Seinfeld one. Yeah, what they did it on Curb. Larry David. You know, you seen that show? Larry David is co-creator of Seinfeld with Jerry Seinfeld, and he has it was on HBO Curb that.
Oh, Curb Your Enthusiasm.
Yes. Yeah, and you know, it's based on his life, right? It's a little mockumentary sort of. There's not a documentary style to it, but it just kind of follows what you imagine his life is like in LA, being like wealthy and the character that he is and all his friends. But they use all of the people from Seinfeld, all the real people. Right. He knows them in his real life, so they propose doing a reunion. And it doesn't work out, but that's the closest we get to having an actual Seinfeld reunion is on that show, acting out like they're gonna do it. Mm-hmm. I mean, they're even on the set and everything, and he casts his wife because he's trying to get her back. I mean, everybody's seen it. But, you know, maybe you could do something cool, maybe like a read-through. Oh, this is a good idea. All right, I bet there's fans out there that can write some scripts, right? So they could write a few scripts and get the few of us that would participate to do like a read-through, you know? And we could do it through Zoom or something. That was real popular during the pandemic, right?
Yeah. That's a good idea. I was also thinking like what if like you all sit together, you say certain things, and then like it's animated over that. You know?
Oh,
yeah. That's
probably even better. Yeah, I like that.
So many ideas.
Yeah,
so many ideas.
A little harder because animation's so labor intensive. But you know, Marco, he's become friends with people that he's met online through the whole downtown world. He met an artist in Canada that was putting together a cartoon, and for a little while, I worked with Marco and them just on a few like scenes. And me and Marco, we recorded them. We recorded audio, and I added like little sound effects of like environment. There was a scene where like they go to someone's house, they're throwing rocks up, so we get some of that kind of sounds. They're like driving. It's fun. I couldn't keep doing it with them just because I realized it was at its infancy. So they were really trying to develop it. And between all the other things I do, I knew I couldn't give them the right amount of energy to like do. But I'm always open to read some lines when something's like solidified, you know?
What message do you hope viewers take away from the character you voiced?
He was respectful, right? He was never really throwing anybody under the bus. He seemed to be friends with everyone, which is good. You know, he didn't really have any enemies. Guy like that, you know, really bridges the gap between people. I think that's the most we could really get from Matt, right? He didn't really give us a lot. He kind of held a lot of his cards to his chest. But yeah, you know, he seemed to be like a peacemaker kind of person. Yeah, I think that's a good one to take away.
So now's your opportunity to give shout outs, share anything you've been working on, life updates, etc.
Shout out to Anastasia. You know who you are, or you'll know who you are. Should check out FM Forest. Some really great music out of, I won't say where because they're anonymous, but FM Forest. Check it out. Dig into Twy the Humble Feather. That's a good one. Oh, and Harmony and Mist music group. Yeah.
And Anastasia is your newborn?
Yes, that's my daughter.
Congratulations.
Yeah.
I remember you telling me about that. I was like, oh man, I hope I'm not like bothering him.
No, it was great. I took Wednesdays off for, I was off for a while and I started back at work, and I've been taking Wednesdays off to have extra day to be with her and mom and just tend to things in the house, in the home, you know. It's amazing how such a tiny person can create such a large mess.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Brandon.